session. We'll progress over to the blackboard in just a moment, or go to the blackboard and begin looking at some of the Greek grammar and some syntax and things of that nature. Before we do that, though, let me share with you a little more about the evolution of the Greek language and how it came to be what it is today. In Greece, or really in Macedonia, which is now part of the country of Greece, but in the ancient times, Macedonia, like Attica and like Sparta and Corinthos and Crete, they were all separate countries, so to speak. And in Macedonia, there was a king by the name of Philip. Philip was a very well-known and very well-loved king of Macedonia, very wealthy king also. Well, Philip had a son, and you have heard his name. He's called Alexander, Alexandrius. He was called Alexandrius Megas, Alexander the Great. Well, when Alexander was a young man, he had determined, by some reasoning, to become ruler of the world. And by the time he was 33 years of age, Alexander the Megas had conquered the known world. Well, in so conquering the world, there's more to it than just simply going out and conquering it. There was logistics involved, and especially communication. If you can't communicate, you can't very well conquer the world. What Alexander did, he, after he began to form his army from the peoples from wherever he conquered, he would have people from every walk of life and from every country. And so language became a real problem in his army. So being a Greek, what he did was to develop a thing or a language called Kini. Kini Elliniki, the common Greek. So from what Alexander the Great developed, it began to evolve like all languages do, and it was a language of the common people. It was spoken throughout his empire. This was imperative. It had to be done. And since it was a common language for the people, it was then also chosen of God and used by the writers under inspiration to then reveal and to share the revelation of God with the world. And therefore we have the history of our Bible language, Kini. Kini Elliniki. This is the common Greek. Anyway, a little history. It might give you a little bit more insight as to why we study Greek, and to know something of the history of Greek also encourages us and helps us in our studies. At this time, we want to go onto the board, and we're going to take some time, and a lot of this is going to be board work, and I would suggest to you that maybe you would have a pencil and paper. And as you see me write various things, you might imitate the writing or copy the writing and become accustomed to, well, pronouncing Greek as well as forming the letters on your notepad. Just a word about the previous session. We closed with the alphabet, with the vowels, and with the diphthongs of Greek. Now you need, it would be very helpful to you to have a chart like those that you saw. I took that one from the Strong's Concordance. It's at the beginning of the Greek dictionary, which is in the back of the concordance. You can find the same information in many books. Most elementary Greek grammar books will have the same information. So you need to find one and begin practicing your pronunciation, learning the alphabet, learning also the vowels and the diphthongs. There's where you must begin. If you don't know the sounds, it's going to be very difficult for you to continue with the study of Greek. So at this time, let's go on to the board and begin our second session of Kini Elliniki. Let's continue now at the whiteboard, if we may, and I'd like to make a statement, and I think if you will try to comprehend this, it will make the study of Greek somewhat easier. Because there is a stigma connected with the study of Greek. The old adage or the old proverb that all Greek to me, simply meaning that it's impossible to understand or know or to learn, simply isn't true. If I can learn Greek, anyone can learn Greek, I'm sure. But I think the key to being successful at the Greek language is understanding that it's not a language, but a science. Therefore, it's built upon blocks. Greek is much like a mathematical equation. You've got all the numbers and you've got all the pieces, and when you put this equation together, it begins to form a tool that then you can take and begin to understand different things. So as you begin your study of Greek, don't become discouraged because it looks just like a pile of pieces and tools there. But as you take the pieces and connect them one to the other, it's like a great puzzle. It soon begins to form a very clear and a definite picture. But just to show you something of the science of the language, now you remember the diphthongs we looked at in the first session. Let's take just a moment and rehearse something about those. Now there were 7 diphthongs. Now the diphthongs were created from the 7 Greek vowels. And so, but we have 2 of the diphthongs that react differently depending on where they are placed or found in a word. Now, we have a diphthong which is made of alpha and iota. We have one also which is omicron iota. Now, it's very important that you remember this. Now, this is only an illustration of how this language is very scientific and it's very exact. All the diphthongs are long in their pronunciation, or they're like long vowels, if you will, except these 2, when they are located at the end of a word, then they become short vowels. Let me illustrate it for you. Let's use the word anthropos. Anthropos, we have, I should put it anthropy, plural. Anthropy, we have this diphthong here found at the end of the word. So it is short in its sound, anthropy. However, when we put anthropy in a different case, if you will, let's say it's anthropis. Anthropis, now we have this diphthong here, again, found not at the end of the word, but it is now located in the body of the word. Now it has gone from a short sound here, located at the end of the word, to a long sound because it is located within the body of the word. Very important to remember because it also affects these long and short sounds and vowels and diphthongs also affect greatly where we put the tonus and the accent marks on the word. Let me give you another illustration, if I may. We have a word, oikos. It looks like this. Okay? Oikos means house. This is the singular. However, when we put it in the plural, it looks like this. Now we have a real demonstration here. We have this diphthong, omicron iota, found at the end as well as the beginning of the word. Now, at the end, it is always going to be short. So here in this one word, we have this diphthong. It is short, and here it is found within the body of the word, here, if you will, because it's at the beginning of the word. We'll divide the word here in the middle. Here, we have it at the beginning, and here it is at the end. At the beginning, the oikos, you can hear it, is a long sound diphthong. At the end, the same diphthong now takes on a short pronunciation. So you can see that Greek is really a very scientific and precise language. It's not like English. I've often asked the Greeks in Greece what is the most difficult language to study, and from all the European languages, they always say English is the most difficult language. Because you have rules in English, but they never apply, they say. It may be a rule here, but tomorrow the rule may not apply to what you're studying. But Greek is not that way. We have definite rules in the Greek language, and they apply, so therefore you know exactly what is what in the Greek language. Now, we also want to take a moment and look at what is called the accent marks. We have 3 basic marks in the Greek language that tell us where to stress the word, so on and so forth. We have one that is slanted this way, one that is slanted this way, and then one that looks sort of like an eyebrow, if you will. Now, the one that is slanted this way is called a grave. The grave, I keep wanting to say it in Greek. It's the grave accent mark, if you will. And then we have one that is pointing this way. It is called the acute. And then this funny one down here that looks sort of like an arch or a rainbow. In Greece, we always put it like this, but nevertheless, as long as you get the idea, this one is called a circumflex. So these three marks you must become accustomed to and used to in Greek. Now, here's another a must when you study Greek. Every word, if you'll notice, every Greek word that I have written here always has an accent mark. If the accent is missing, you don't have a word. The accents must be there. They didn't put them there because they didn't have anything else to do, by the way. These are there for a reason. It tells us where to accent the word and how it is to be accented, as well as is also very helpful in knowing when to move these accent marks as well, when you get to the different cases and numbers and so on and so forth with the various words. Now also, these different accent marks in time past had something to do with what is called the breathing of the language. I had to learn to breathe all over again when I studied Greek, because in English you didn't breathe very much. You didn't do much of anything with the English language. But these marks are breathing marks of some kind. Now, there's a lot written about the breathing marks, and they will tell you in the Greek grammar books it is to be this way, or sounds this way, or whatever. The fact of the matter is, no one, not the Greeks, not the English, have any idea what these things sounded like because they have passed away. So I don't spend a great deal of time on the breathing marks. However, it is something to be aware of. And don't forget also, what we're doing in this introductory film or video is simply, hopefully, to whet your appetite enough that you might want to further study the language of Greek. So we're going to hit, just the very high points in the language as we give you this introduction. And there are going to be many, many things that we don't even reference or refer to, but I simply want to give you an idea of what Greek is, how it benefits you in your studies, and hopefully that maybe you will see the need or inspiration, if you will, to take some time and to study the Greek language. Now let's go on to another part of Greek, and this is probably the most notorious part of the Greek language. Is called the verbs. The verb, as you know from your grammar, is the action of every sentence and every phrase. So we're going to look at the verb. We call it the rima. And the plural is the rimata. Okay? So we're going to look at the Greek rima, if you will, the Greek verb. Now, it's like verbs everywhere else, I guess, except sometimes it seems like the Greek becomes a bit more detailed and precise. Every Greek verb is going to have the following. It's going to have a tense. It's going to have a voice. It's going to have mood, person, and number. Now, that's a lot in one word. But the Greek verb is the very key of the language, because in the verb is all the action and the subject. Literally, in one word, the Greek language can express an entire thought that will require a sentence in other languages to express. So you can see the importance of the verb. Now, as I said, every verb must have a voice. Now, I'm sure you remember this from your English grammar. Every verb has a mood. Every verb has a person. And it has a number. And we'll see this in just a moment as we begin to open it up. And it has a tense. Okay? Now, what do we mean by all of these things? Let's take just a moment and look at some things. I want to show you, first of all, a couple of illustrations. The verb has to do with an action, if you will, as I said before. Now, there are two kinds of action in any language. There is the time of action and the kind of action. Now, this is where Greek becomes a bit concentrated, if you will, even a bit difficult. Because in many languages, you have a finished action, and you have a present action, and you have a future action. But in Greek, it's not quite that simple. But just to simplify things, let's look at it just for a moment, and we want to see the tense, if you will. Let's examine, first of all, the tense of the verb. What do we mean by the tense? We simply mean it has to do with the action. Now, in the tense of the verb, we have this. We have two kinds of action. We have, first of all, a time of action which is past, present, and future. We have past, present, and future. Second, in the tense, we see a kind of action. By that I mean it is a continual or a finished action. So we have a kind of action which is going to be continued or it's going to be finished. Very important that we remember these things because it affects everything you say and do in the Greek language. I remember sitting at the University of Athens, and quite frankly, my first year, I was lost. I had no idea much of the time what page they were on because they did not use English to teach you with. The books that we had didn't have one English word in them. You had to learn everything. After about 2 weeks, there was no English at all used in the lesson. And so therefore, much of the time, I didn't even know what page we were on. So you can see that that to learn these things and put them in their proper place is going to be very, very imperative if you learn Greek. Now, but it can be done, by the way. Now, we're looking at a kind of action. Now, for instance, let me share this with you. Or let's just illustrate it here. The kind of action. We can say, first of all, he is loosing. He is loosing. This is a continual action. Second, we can say there is a finished action. He loosed. This is what I mean. He loosed. He is loosing the dog. He loosed the dog. So we see that in the tense there is a time of action, which is past, present, and future. And then, second, there is a kind of action, which is either continual or it is finished. Let's go now to the voice, if you will. In Greek, we have three voices. I don't know, maybe in French or maybe in German there are also three voices as well. But in Greek, it's very specific and it's very useful. In the Greek language, our first voice is called the active voice. Our second voice is called a passive voice. The third voice is called the middle passive. Now, these are very important and very interesting because it allows you to express things that's very difficult to express in other languages unless you're writing sentences or a paragraph to do it. Let me give you an illustration. In the active, what we have here is the subject is doing the acting, if you will. I can say, I clean my house. I'm going to use the verb clean. The verb is katharizo. Katharizo. This is the verb. This is the present, indicative, active, if you will. It means I am now presently involved in something I am cleaning. Now we come to the passive, and let me, if I may, distinguish the passive from the middle passive. We have the active, the subject is doing the acting. Now we come to a passive verb, the same verb, if you will. It's katha Rhizome. Katharizome. Now you'll notice what changes here in the word is the ending. We have the zeta, omega. This is the active voice. Here we still have the zeta, and the end of our word is now changed up with ome. What we have done is move from the active into the passive. This means that there was an act done to you by an outside force, if you will. And then we have the middle passive, which means you have done an act to yourself. I washed myself. I can say here, I washed my house, but if I put it here, again, let me repeat this, katharizome, understand, complying with the text of our sentence, I then have said in one word, I clean myself. So we see the importance of these three different voices, if you will. Now, if you are a Bible student, I'm sure this is going to be of some interest to you. In John chapter 3, when Jesus met with Nicodemus and spoke with him, he told him that he must be born again. Now in English, be born puts us in a passive voice because it is an action done to you. In Greek, it's very simple. He says in Greek, you must be anagenethite. Anagenethite. This means you must be born again. Or we may even find it without the ana. Genethite. Here, and we'll get to this in a moment when we get to the, well, this is going to have something to do with the tense that we're not interested in right now. But we see here in the study or in the word, the base word is genome. This is the base word, which means to be born, to be generated, if you will. We come here to the word, we have the geni, but now we change up the ending of the word and it takes on a theta, which now puts us in a whole different ball game. This is a future, one-time, completed act that will be done to Nicodemus, or any other sinner, if you will. Anyway, just a little bit to show you there how this is used and how it clarifies many things. Now let's go on, if you will, from the voice, and let's go down to the mood of the verb. All of these things are very, very important, and to misunderstand them or to deliberately skip over them will leave great holes in your study, and you will not be able to understand. I had a tutor in Athens. We called him Marcos the Perfect. He was very demanding on every point. He would always tell us in our studies, if you leave one thing undone, you have created a gap, and therefore you may as well stop your studies until you have filled the gap. So it is very true in the study of Greek. You have got to cover all the material if you're going to understand. Let's go to the mood. Now we've looked at the tense, we've looked at the voice. Let's take a moment and look at the different moods that we find in Greek. Now I'm not going to list all of them for you at this time, but we have a present active indicative. Now you will remember these phrases or these words from your English grammar, I'm sure. We have a present active indicative. We have a present passive indicative. We have a middle passive indicative. We have an aorist I think you say it in English. I forgot how you say it in English. In Greek, it's the aortistos, which means it is the past, completed act. We have an aortistos. We have the aortistos active and middle indicative. But anyway, this will give you an idea. This let me illustrate, if I may, with this aortistos, active and middle indicative. The active indicative in the aortistos, which means a past completed act. It happened, it's finished, it's not going to repeat itself. We look at the word Leo. Let me give you the word here. This is the base word, Leo. Leo means I wash. I clean, if you will. We say here with the aortistos active, it is Elise or Elisa, depending on the person. We'll put it in the first person. So it's Elisa. This means I washed, or I dissolved away. This is the aortistos active. Now we're going to look at the middle indicative, or the, as we said earlier, the middle passive indicative. And it looks something like this. Changes up quite a bit. Elisamin. Elisamin. Now we have gone from the active to the middle passive, or the passive voice. So you can see that Greek, it becomes equations. Equation after equation. But don't become so alarmed that you frighten yourself, because it looks complicated, but here's the key. After you begin to learn the stems and the roots of the words, whether it be a noun, an adjective, or a verb, it then becomes a very simple matter of simply putting the stem with the root. And you've suddenly been able to master word after word after word and to use them. Now, as we get farther into the study, we're going to see that these endings are very repetitious, because they can only mean one thing. Now, there are more than one ending, of course. But anyway, we'll see that as we move further into the study. Now, we've looked at the tense. We've looked at the voice. We've looked at the mood. Now, let's take a moment and look at the person of the verb. Now, don't forget, the Greek verb is probably the epicenter of all your studies, because it contains your action as well as your subject. So let's look now at the person, if you will. Again, in any language, you're going to have person. And by person, I mean I, you, he, she, and it. I am the first person. You are the second person. He, she, it is the second or the third person. Now that is the singular. We also have the plural. Again, it is us and you plural and them. So in Greek, we also have the same thing. And I think as we move further into the study, we're going to see this. So let's move now to the number. Like anything else, like any other verb in a language, we're going to have a singular and plural. Singular and plural. I remember the word I showed you with the diphthong at the beginning of the word and the end of the word. Eikos. This is the singular. Eikos. Iki is the plural. So every word, as in every language, has both a singular and a plural. You know, we're talking about verbs and nouns and adjectives, of course. Now let's move on to some illustrations here. I have a word I want to share with you, and I want to show you the voice, the mood, the person, the number, and the tense as we're looking at this word, and you can see how it is all formulated and then how it all comes together. Now we have just a few moments left, so let's begin looking at this word here. The word I have already shared with you is the word Leo. Okay? Means I dissolve, I solve, I wash away, if you will. We want to examine the part of this verb. Now, this verb, as you see it, is a present active indicative. It's a present tense action happening right now. Now, I want to, and I don't know if we have time in this session or not to complete what I want to show you, but just let me say a few words about it and we'll pick it up in the next session. This verb here contains the action as well as the subject. This one word contains the voice, the mood, the person, the number, as well as the tense. So we see in one simple word, in one swift of the pen, if you will, we've been able to express a complete thought and convey information that may take a sentence or even a paragraph in other languages to convey. Now, when we come back in our third session, we're going to take the time to look at this verb, leo, and we want to examine it in the voice, the mood, the person, the number, as well as the tense. And I think it's going to be enlightening, and it's going to help us open more doors as we begin to look at other things in this introduction to New Testament Greek. Session 3 of New Testament Greek Introduction.